Cereal companies spent a century convincing you breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Homo sapiens existed for roughly 300,000 years, and for most of that time, nobody ate first thing after waking. A fixed morning meal is younger than the telephone. So what did an empty stomach do to a hunter-gatherer's brain after 14 hours without food? And why does that same emptiness feel like an emergency to us now? Welcome back. Today we trace the meal humans spent most of their history without, and what its absence did to the brain. The standard story goes like this. After 8 hours of sleep, blood sugar drops, and breakfast refuels the brain before the body can function. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe spent decades studying the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last true foraging societies on Earth. Hadza adults typically eat nothing until mid-morning, sometimes not until 11 a.m., after hours spent digging for tubers and climbing for honey. If a stalled brain made humans non-functional, evolution picked a strange way to run the species. Picture a forager 20,000 years ago. The group wakes, and nobody reaches for food first. They move, track, dig, scan the ground for fruit. Meals arrive when the land provides them, not on a clock. Some days that means noon. Some days it means dusk after 12 hours of searching. The forager's body was not damaged by the wait. It ran a specific chemical program built for exactly this gap. Liver glycogen, the sugar stored from the last meal, runs out after about 12 hours without food. Once it's gone, the liver switches fuel source and turns fat into molecules called ketone bodies. Physician George Cahill at Harvard in the 1960s studied volunteers fasting for weeks under medical supervision. He found that after a few days without food, ketones can supply up to 60% of the brain's energy. The brain does not shut down when glycogen runs low. It changes what it burns. Neuroscientist Mark Mattson spent over 20 years at the National Institute on Aging studying this state. He found fasting raises brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein tied to new neural connections. At the same time, cells activate autophagy, a cleanup process that clears damaged proteins and worn-out parts. Biologist Yoshinori Osumi won the 2016 Nobel Prize for mapping the genetics behind it. None of this requires food in the stomach. Ghrelin, the hormone behind hunger, was identified by researcher Kenji Kangawa in 1999. It rises before a meal and falls after one arrives, but it does not fire on a fixed clock alone. Feed a body at 7 a.m. daily, and ghrelin learns to expect food at 7 a.m. Feed it at noon instead, and the signal shifts to noon. Morning hunger is a habit the body learns through repetition. Ancient Rome treated a heavy morning meal as a character flaw. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century A.D., called eating more than one substantial meal a day a sign of poor discipline. Most Romans ate ientaculum, a small bite of bread if anything, and saved cena, the real meal, for evening. By the Middle Ages, eating before morning prayers carried moral weight. Thomas Aquinas listed eating too early as a form of gluttony in his 13th century writings. Field laborers got an exception and grabbed bread before dawn. Merchants and nobles usually waited until midday. The word breakfast, meaning to break the night's fast, entered common English around the 15th century, and even then it described an occasional indulgence. Factory clocks changed everything. Once the Industrial Revolution locked labor into shifts starting at 6 or 7 a.m., workers needed fuel before the whistle blew. At the end of the 19th century, in Battle Creek, Michigan, John Harvey Kellogg and rival C.W. Post built cereal companies and spent fortunes convincing the public that a morning bowl of processed grain was a medical necessity. By the 1920s, advertising had turned an old debate about gluttony into a claim about energy and health. Most adults now eat within 30 minutes of waking, closing a fast that once ran 14, sometimes 18 hours. Studies on time-restricted eating from the 2010s show insulin sensitivity peaks in the fasted state, right before that first bite. Eating immediately removes the exact window when the body handles blood sugar best. The empty stomach a hunter-gatherer carried into midday was not a malfunction. and it was not suffering. It matched the state the brain evolved to run on, burning ketones, clearing damaged proteins, building new connections, hours before food arrived. The bowl of cereal did not rescue a starving brain. It interrupted a repair process that had been running successfully for a few 100,000 years. That's the story of the meal humans spent most of history without. What time do you eat your first meal? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe for the next episode.